Good day, this is Sir Aldrin. Today, we will talk about how to write a summary effectively. The ability to summarize a text is one of the most difficult and most useful skill you can acquire as a writer. When writing the summary, there are three main requirements. Number 1, the summary should cover the original as a whole. Number 2, the material should be presented in a neutral fashion. Number 3, the summary should be a condensed version of the material presented in your own words. Also, do not include anything that does not appear in the original. Do not include your own comments or evaluation, and be sure to identify your source. Steps to follow when writing a summary. Part 1. Reviewing the piece. The first thing that you should do is to read the piece thoroughly. You should read it without making any kind of marks. Instead, focus on really understanding what the author is trying to say. This might mean that you need to read one sentence or paragraph more than once. You might also want to reread the whole piece, and that is fine. Next, write down what you think the main point of the piece is. This will help you start to put the piece's arguments in your own words. You can also ask yourself what point or points or themes come up throughout the entire piece. The title can also give you a tip as to the main point of the piece. The third step is to reread the piece, taking notes on the major points of it. Once you know for sure what the author's main point is, read again the piece, looking for the ways they support that point. You can find supporting material by looking for details that refer to the title, surprises in the argument or plot, repetition, or a lot of attention to details such as descriptions of characters. Write down each time something like this occurs. To put something in your own words, write it down as if you were explaining or describing it to a friend. In that case, you wouldn't just read what the author wrote. Do the same when you're writing down the major points in your own words. A fourth step is don't focus on the evidence that the author uses to support those points. You only need to know what they are arguing. So, for example, say the author's main argument is the US civil rights movement actually began in the 1950s. They might say that women's boycott of mass transit is an example of this. You only need to note that women's boycott, not the examples of that boycott that the author uses. For fiction pieces, this means avoiding rewriting every single thing that happens in the piece. Focus instead on the major plot points and the main motivator for those points. Don't include everything that happens to the character along the way. Part 2. Writing the summary in your own words. First step is to start with the source information. You should start every summary with the author and the article's title. This lets your reader know that you're summarizing what someone else has written. For example, you can start with something like, William Shakespeare's Macbeth is a play that shows the damaging physical and psychological effects of political ambition on those who seek power for its own good. The second step is to work from memory to write the main point of each section. Without looking at your notes, write a first draft that includes the main point of each section in your own words. A summary should not just repeat what the original author said, so using your own words is very important. If you absolutely must use the original author's words, put them in quotation marks. This tells your reader those words aren't yours. Not doing this is academic plagiarism, and it can get you in a lot of trouble. Make sure you format the code correctly. The third step is to present the material using the author's point of view. As you write, make sure you're only summarizing the original piece of writing. You should not be inserting your own opinions of the piece or of the events the piece covers. Instead, summarize what the original author said and retain their tone and point of view. For example, you might think that Hamlet spends a lot of time thinking and not a lot of time acting. You can say something like, Hamlet is a man of thought rather than action. Instead of saying, why doesn't Hamlet do something once in a while? The next step is use language appropriate to a summary. You want your reader to know that you are summarizing another person's arguments. So you should occasionally use phrases like the author argues or the article claims when you are presenting those arguments. This reminds the reader that it's not your piece, but someone else's. In fiction pieces, you can say something like, Shakespeare's Hamlet then spends a lot of time brooding on the castle ramparts. This tells your reader you're talking about Shakespeare's play, not inventing your own story. Part 3. Revising your draft into a coherent summary. In the last part of writing a summary, the first thing that you should do is to reread the draft you wrote from memory against your notes. Take your notes out and compare them to your from memory draft. If there's anything major you forgot to include, put it in your second draft. Next, present the summary in chronological order. Rather than jumping around to different parts of the story or article, you should explain what happened in the sequence that it happened. This is especially important for summarizing works of fiction. Eliminate repetition is the next step. Sometimes in an article or book, the author might make the same point multiple times as a way to underline their main points. In your summary, you don't need to do this. When you are reading your summary, delete any repetitive points, even if the author makes them multiple times. You only need to make them once. If you notice an author has made the same point multiple times, though, it's a good indicator that this is an important point, and it should definitely be in your summary. The fourth step is add transitions where necessary. If you're focused on getting all of the main points down, you might not be paying attention to how the paragraphs of your summary fit together. When you revise, make sure that you connect each paragraph to the next and back to the main point. The next step is check for grammatical and spelling errors. Once you finish revising the arguments in your draft, check the little things. Make sure there are no spelling or grammar mistakes. Look for any additional or missing punctuation and correct that as well. Don't use spell checker for spelling errors. It will catch if you spell something wrong, but not if you use the wrong spelling of a word. Next step is check your length. Once you've added anything you might have forgotten to your summary, check how long it is. If you are summarizing something for a school assignment, be sure to stick to the parameters or guidelines provided by your instructor. Generally, a summary should be around 1/4 the length of the original piece. So, if the original piece is 4 pages long, your summary should be no more than 1 page. The last step is ask someone to read your work. Another person may see an argument or point in a completely different light than you have, giving you a new feel for the work and yours. Not only should they be comparing your work for accuracy, ask them to read it for flow and summation. They should be able to understand what happened in the article or story by reading your summary alone. Don't hesitate to ask for criticism. Then weigh those criticisms and make valid changes. Once again, those are the steps in writing a summary effectively. You may now open your Classera account and answer the task of this lesson. Thank you and have a nice day.